I never used to keep track of my gaming exploits. That is to say, it wasn't until 2016 that I actually started keeping track of the games that I played and finished simply out of curiosity. I had always wondered how many I would finish in a year, but that was always an easy exercise because with a heavy life schedule, finishing video games just isn't always easy. But I always like to see how many I finished so that I can measure it against previous years. For example, in 2021, I only managed to finish 9 games, but in 2022, I doubled that and capped off 18. This year's tally is lower than last year's, but I didn't make as much time for games in 2023 as I normally do. Still, I thought it might be fun to take a look back at some of the games I played and completed this past year, and also some that got shelved. This video is completely inspired by Corey and Tri over at My Life in Gaming, who do an amazing job of recapping their annual year in review. I've linked their video below in case you haven't seen it, and you should definitely subscribe to their channel. There is some incredible stuff there. Alright, enough of this intro, let's get to the games. The majority of the games I finished in 2022 were courtesy of Xbox Game Pass, and the first game I wrapped up in 2023 was more of the same. Coffee Talk is a visual novel of sorts, and it's very, very text-heavy. It's a simple story that takes place in a very Seattle-inspired backdrop with a bit of a twist. The patrons make up a diverse community of monsters and humans with their own individual backstories. The game takes place at, you guessed it, a coffee shop. Characters share their stories of life, what they're dealing with, life at the office, and sometimes they order coffee and you need to make it. They're not always specific about what they want either, so based on what they ask for, you need to figure out how to make it based on the ingredients you have on hand. And that is pretty much the extent of the gameplay. I rather enjoyed Coffee Talk on the Series X, and I was genuinely interested in the characters and the storylines that intertwined throughout. It's definitely not for those who don't enjoy visual novels in their video games, but if you're looking for something that's easy to pick up without giving it much thought, Coffee Talk is a good option for those laid-back sessions. After enjoying the splendor of Fire Emblem Three Houses, I was anxiously awaiting another Fire Emblem experience from Nintendo, and Engage did not disappoint. While I admit I didn't enjoy it as much as Three Houses, I think that's more due to how incredible the former is to the latter, that is to say Three Houses versus Engage. In its own right, Engage continues with the tried and true Fire Emblem formula and adds its own touch to it with the Engage mechanic that introduces characters from Fire Emblem titles gone by into this game's universe. I'm actually surprised at how divisive it appears Engage is online with so many other people. Some really enjoy it, and others always find ways to dump on it, but I am certainly not one of them. I really enjoyed the Engage element, and it's a fantastic release on the Switch that complements the Fire Emblem library nicely. It was almost my favorite game that I played in 2023, but it takes a close second to something that comes up a little later on. Now, if we can just get some of those Fire Emblem handheld games on a home console... The heroes from the pages, like the stories of the ages, bonds of hope, unite us, shining on to guide us, skies above embrace the beauty, the time is now for you and When Castlevania Symphony of the Night was released in 1997, you best believe I rented that game as soon as I possibly could. I am terrible at Castlevania games, but that doesn't stop me from appreciating this franchise so much. As a matter of fact, the only Castlevania game I've ever completed was on the Nintendo 3DS, until this year. Since renting Symphony of the Night in '97, I hadn't played it up until 2023. That was despite owning a PS1 copy and a digital copy on my PS3. I never made it a priority to play, but I did in 2023. and it was as great as I remember. I say I finished it, but I'm not sure I got the real ending by all accounts, but I saw end credits, and that was enough for me. I think the best part about Symphony of the Night is that regardless of whether or not you get this ending or that ending, it's an absolute classic that has tons of replayability. I'm upset that I took 26 years to play this game again, but at the same time, I'm so happy to experience that this Konami classic still holds up all of these years later.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. But enough talk. Have at you!
In full transparency, I actually finished Shredder's Revenge in 2022, so I debated putting it on the list for 23, but I experienced it in a different way, so it's on the list. Let me explain. Shredder's Revenge is an absolute gem, and I was so giddy when I saw that first trailer drop. It looked to be exactly what I wanted from a modern Ninja Turtles video game, and it certainly did not disappoint. The original cartoon voice cast, the addictive beat-em-up action, and throwbacks and references to Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo. It's such a wonderful package. Like I said, I had previously played and finished this game when it came out, but this time around, I got to finish it with a friend. Not online either, real couch co-op, like the old days. I don't have too many friends who still enjoy video games, let alone retro or retro-inspired titles. This playthrough holds a special place for me. He's such a good dude, and this is such a great game. It took me back to 1992 in all the best ways possible. You might say 2023 was the year of Dragon Quest for me. Dragon Warrior on the NES was the first RPG I'd ever played, and I'd always wanted to go back and play it through, but I never had the patience to push through those old school mechanics. Still, it's always eluded me. I even started playing the Super Famicom release of Dragon Quest a couple of years back, but a corrupt save file took the wind out of my sails pretty quick. Still, the desire did not go away, so when I saw the trilogy on sale for the Switch for dirt cheap, I knew I just had to jump. I know many don't care for these essentially mobile ports, but I really liked Dragon Quest. It was exactly what I expected, Dragon Quest in widescreen HD. That's pretty much it. There's some quality of life improvements from the original, sure, but the grind is still there, and that's part of the charm of old school RPGs for those that enjoy them. I had never finished a Dragon Quest game before, but little did I know it wasn't even the only Dragon Quest title that I would finish in 2023. I mentioned I had purchased the trilogy, and since the original Dragon Quest didn't take too long to play through, and I wasn't burned out, I went straight from the first iteration into the sequel. There's not much more to say about Dragon Quest II, the gameplay is pretty much identical to the first one, and aside from a bit of a different storyline, it was more of the same, and I was more than happy with that. Once I had wrapped up the first two DQ games, I was ready to move on to Dragon Quest III, which I had heard was one of the absolute best in the franchise. But as you'll see, it's not the next game on my list. More on that in a bit. Puyo Tetris was the first of two Christmas gifts under the tree a few years ago, alongside Super Mario Odyssey, but it wasn't until 2023 that I finally decided to finish the story. Yes, there's a story mode with Puyos and Tetronymos, and it's full of characters that you play as, and there's a variety of battles comprised of both Puyo and Tetris puzzles, some of which switch in mid-battle. It's not overly deep, and the story mode is pretty light, but it's a nice way to make a puzzle game more than just a puzzle game. I'm a huge Tetris fan. It's one of my favorite franchises, but I'd never played a Puyo game prior to this one. That's right, no Puyo, no mean bean machine, nothing at all. For what it is, I enjoyed this game, even though I discovered I'm really terrible at Puyo games, and that lack of ability made some of those stages a lot longer than they needed to be. It's a great pick up and play on the Switch, and you certainly don't need to play the story mode to enjoy it. And now it's time for me to add the sequel to my list for a future playthrough.
I bet I'm super duper adorable as a damsel in distress. Why's no one here to see me being so adorable? I have the worst luck ever! I hope someone finds me before I starve so they can see how cute I am! Pee-pee? Huh? What's this chubby little thing? I wonder if I can eat it. Pee-pee! Hey, sorry.
Another Christmas gift from the year prior that took me far too long to finally sit down and play, but Spider-Man Miles Morales was another wonderful Insomniac experience. Similar to the first game released on the PS4, Miles Morales just extended everything that Spider-Man brought to the table and gave it a fresh coat of paint. I say a fresh coat of paint because there's really nothing here that makes it much more than extended DLC from Spider-Man itself. And that's not a knock or a negative, but aside from being released on the PS5, the game doesn't feel much more than an additional story that might have been better served as DLC. Again, the fact that it feels less like a full-fledged release shouldn't deter you from enjoying this. I certainly played it with a ton of enjoyment, specifically because I really liked the first one so much. Now, I can't wait to play Spider-Man 2, which did arrive under the tree this Christmas and will definitely be on the list of games finished in 2024. This game just about didn't make the list, and that's not a good thing. I always enjoy seeing IPs from my childhood get new releases in modern times, and I was really excited to see a new Bobble game in recent years. The problem with the game, though, is it's not good, like, at all. There's a fine line when you take an original franchise and adapt it for the times. To the chagrin of many, I like seeing releases like Double Dragon 4, that original 8-bit style, but a new game released for a new generation. Or something like Streets of Rage 4 or Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap, modernizing those older releases and done with a wonderful amount of love and balance. Bobble for Friends does neither. Sure, it's Bobble for a new generation, but it falls flat. The control is not good, and aside from a lot of other things, this alone makes it unenjoyable. Terrible controls. The game's only saving grace for me was that it has a release of the arcade original within it, and I spent more time playing that than the game proper. I'm terribly disappointed, and it makes me skeptical to play the newest Snow Brothers release as well. I don't even know how I came across this game, but I paid less than $1 for it, and I have to say, it wasn't bad. Released on Steam, Clash Force is another one of those dime a dozen retro-inspired platformers that frankly doesn't do anything special. It's not special in any regard, but don't mistake that as being bad. It's comfort food, and it was exactly what I was looking for from a short game. It was about 90 minutes to finish, and I had fun with it for what it is. Developed by Spicy Gyro Games, there's 3 different characters and 25 stages to play through, and none that are overly long. It definitely has that retro learning mechanic required, but again, nothing difficult. For a quick romp, you could do much worse than Clash Force.
Enemy commander down.
After playing Fire Emblem Warriors and all of its included DLC on the Switch a few years back, I was excited to see another Warriors game getting released, and I was quite happy with it. Similar to the first iteration, Three Hopes takes the original Fire Emblem Warriors formula, makes some subtle gameplay tweaks and changes, but offers up the cast and crew from Three Houses, which is why it immediately endeared itself to me. There are some definite camera issues from time to time that get annoying, but all in all, this was an enjoyable experience. It's that wonderful, mindless hacking and slashing that I enjoy, complete with RPG elements of upgrading and crafting that makes it great. It's simple, but it works, and it all lives in that Three Houses universe that I cherish so much. My biggest beef about this game is the ending. It leaves a little to be desired. I won't say much more than that, but I'll say the way the story built itself up, I expected a much different outcome. Maybe there's something there that I'm missing, maybe not. Either way, it's fine because, like Three Houses, there are 3 different storylines to play through, so I imagine I'll get another house and storyline completed in 2024. Alright, before I hit on my 2023 Game of the Year, let's take a quick look at some of the games that I played this past year that didn't make the finished list. For years, I read about the Mario and Luigi games and definitely wanted to try my hands on Superstar Saga. I figured it was best to start at the beginning, and you know what? I didn't like it. It was great for the first few hours, but then I just got really bored with it. It was too much of the same, and I felt bad at first, but it got shelved. Earlier, I gushed about playing Coffee Talk, so when I saw the sequel on Game Pass, I thought it'd be great to play another in the series. And I was wrong. The reality is that it's the same as the original, with a few returning characters and a few new ones. It's a bit of an extended storyline, so you almost need to have played the first game in order to understand some of the storyline here. What I learned, though, is that one Coffee Talk experience was enough for me. Similar to the 2 games that came before it, I was really looking forward to Dragon Quest III, especially after seeing so many positive things said about it online and with its fans. So why isn't it on the completed list? Well, it should be. I'm about 90% done, I think. But after cruising through this game, I got to one of the final battles and it appears I'm grossly underpowered. And at this point, I just didn't have it in me to grind the necessary levels to beat the game. This might be on the completed list for 2024. That is to say, unless that new HD release gets announced this year. This game had everything I wanted. A G.I. Joe IP, a wonderful cast of characters, a cartoon graphical style, a shooter, just like a G.I. Joe game should be, all of those wonderful aspects. And this game absolutely sucks. I mean, it is awful. This was on my Switch wishlist for so long, and I finally grabbed it on a sale, and I wish that I hadn't. The control is awful. The aiming, the pacing, the balance, there's not a good thing I'll say about it. It's shelved forever. And now for a quick look at some other games that saw time in 2023. beating out Fire Emblem Engage, Dragon Quest XI was my favorite game that I played in 2023. I had been eyeing up DQ11 for a few years, but as mentioned, I hadn't played a Dragon Quest game since Warriors on the NES, and I didn't know where to start. As a matter of fact, the reason I went back and played the first 3 games was because I'd been doing some reading on DQ11, and it had suggested that while you didn't need to know anything about previous DQ lore before playing 11, it certainly would make some familiar connections that would be good to understand, or at least enjoy. Having now played it, I can say that while having a small understanding of DQ lore was fun for references, it wasn't all that necessary. However, if the first 3 DQ games didn't make a Dragon Quest fan out of me, DQ11 certainly did. I could gush about Dragon Quest XI for a long time, so I'll try and keep it brief here. There's so much to like, and I was sucked in early, and that joy kept with me during the entire playthrough. I knew DQ11 was going to be a long one, and it was, but I enjoyed it as much in the end as I did in the beginning. While the turn-based battle was familiar and easy to navigate, it was the characters, cutscenes, and storytelling that make this game so charming. And Silvando, he just might be my favorite RPG protagonist of all time. He is just so refreshing.
Oh, no you don't, honey. Not unless you want to carry those clothes home in a bag. Well, don't say I didn't warn you.
I'm doing a terrible job of selling this game and telling you how much I enjoyed it, maybe, but it really does deserve to be played, to be understood, and enjoyed for yourself. Now, I've been told by Michael B. the Game Genie that I haven't completely finished it despite seeing the end credits. Apparently there's a new game plus that I need to experience to get the true ending. While I hate that aspect of video game storytelling, I might go back in 2024 to see what I'm missing. I'm only willing to do that for games that I really enjoy, and Dragon Quest XI ranks right up there for me. I can officially say that I am now a Dragon Quest fanboy. Not an extensive list for this year, but that's a snapshot of what my gaming habits looked like. Those who know me know there's a good handful of hours dedicated to some hockey and wrestling in there as well, but I don't include those in lists or anything like that since they still do eat up so much of my limited game time. My goal for 2024 is to give more games a fair shot, and like my life in gaming, I've marked a handful of games that I want to ensure that I play this year no matter what. I won't list them here, but rest assured I'll be sure to share them somewhere. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I hope that your gaming ventures for the upcoming year, whatever they may be, are fruitful and successful. Maybe you can finally tackle that backlog, but probably not.